Welcome to Across Africa, France 24's weekly roundup from across the continent. Coming up this week, after fighting in Juba sparked a mass exodus of foreigners, leaving hundreds dead, those with no option but to stay put in the South Sudanese capital live in fear and uncertainty. Also, the UN warns that around 250,000 kids are facing starvation in Borno state. Hundreds of people displaced by Nigeria's Boko Haram insurgency have reportedly starved to death as the state-run aid agency struggles to cope. And it's caterpillar season in Central African Republic, and that means grub is up. Insect appetizers are a national speciality, nutritious and reportedly delicious. Squeamishness, though, is definitely not on the menu. But first, during the recent clashes between fighters loyal either to President Salva Kiir or his deputy, Riek Machar, left hundreds dead in Juba, many governments decided to evacuate their nationals from South Sudan. But those who call only the capital home, there's been no choice but to deal with the instability and uncertainty that's followed.
The fighting may have stopped in Juba, but the struggle for survival has not. Desperate for food and shelter, thousands lined up at this church in search of aid after they were forced from their homes. Many were still unsure if their loved ones had survived.
The bullets were flying around, so I ran away with 4 of my brother's children. I don't know where the parents are. I don't know if they're alive. Or just running, taking along whoever we could.
Many survivors haven't dared to return home, afraid of what they will find. Bodies are still being discovered in the Jebel area, where most of the fighting took place. We weren't allowed to speak to anyone here, but saw government soldiers and young men pillaging through abandoned homes, piling their loot onto anything that could move. The capital, Juba, is relatively stable after the government pushed out opposition forces, but some areas are still not safe for civilians. Over the weekend, we saw bodies of at least 2 civilians who were killed in recent violence, while others were harassed at checkpoints. The spokesperson of the National Army, the SPLA, denied widespread looting and ongoing harassment by government soldiers.
I would say that the SPLA is a huge army. You cannot rule out having some bad elements within the force. But we made it very clear that whoever has been affected by behavior of some of our servicemen in terms of looting should come forward. And if there are SPLA soldiers who are involved, then they are brought to book.
But few here trust that those responsible for the destruction of their properties and the deaths of so many will be brought to account. For now, all they can do is hope for more aid and start the painful process of rebuilding their lives.
UNICEF's raised the alarm about a suspected 250,000 kids who are at risk of starvation in Borno state, northeastern Nigeria. Years of the brutal Boko Haram insurgency have wreaked havoc on trade, livelihoods, and access to medication. Many living in displacement camps struggle to get hold of even the most basic necessities. Our correspondent sent us this report from Maiduguri.
Tailors are hard at work in Dolari camp. SULEIMAN found refuge here 18 months ago after Boko Haram insurgents attacked his village. He hopes that tailoring will earn him enough money to rebuild his home, but very few people have the means to buy his clothes.
We had hoped that Ramadan would bring us more business. But people just can't afford it. So this year, we earned very little.
Around 30,000 people live in this camp that is the most populous in all of West Africa. The highlight of most people's lives is the distribution of food and clothes. Security is tight here because of repeated attacks by suicide bombers on camps in the region. Trauma is widespread because of the horrors people have experienced at the hands of the world's deadliest insurgent group. Many people prefer to cling on to the relative safety of the camp than to return home.
We pray for peace and to be able to return to our home. Life here at the camp cannot be compared to our lives back home, no matter what we receive here.
A humanitarian aid delivery is underway. The state-run aid agency, NEMA, is responsible for distributing food and clothes to IDPs in camps across the country. They have come under close scrutiny in recent weeks due to the death of 200 people at a camp about 70 kilometres from here in Bama. The camps here in Borno State are all overpopulated.
Military are liberating all villages and towns outside Maiduguri. And daily they liberated people. So you can see planning. We have to replan and replan again. You can see the quantum of, large quantum of food that we are packing. And this one, it will only last for 2 or 3 months.
IDPs wait in an uncertain limbo somewhere between liberty and captivity. The promises of President Muhammadu Buhari and the pledges of financial aid for reconstruction are not enough to convince these people to return home.
Eastern DR Congo has a long history of instability. Various militia have used it as their stomping ground for decades. Now, that's put a lot of pressure on the different communities living side by side there. Recently, ethnic tensions have flared up between villages in North Kivu.
For the last 16 years, the remote village of Buluuso was held by Hutu FDLR rebels, whose founders took part in the genocide in Rwanda. But at the end of last year, the rebels were chased out by local militias. As they left, they destroyed most of the houses. The Kobo community returned here first, followed by Hutu civilians. But the Kobo accused the Hutus of still harbouring FDLR rebels.
The FDLR raped women here. They burnt down our houses, and the Hutus were up there, came into our fields to take our crops. Given everything that's happened here, we don't know whether we live in Rwanda or Congo now.
UN peacekeepers have been sent here. Last month, they killed 7 militiamen who tried to prevent aid workers giving out food to Hutu civilians. The governor of North Kivu has named a mediator to try and reconcile the two communities.
They must forget the past and start living peacefully, side by side. The state should also try to comfort the people that were held as prisoners. For example, they could give them sheets of metal so they can rebuild their houses.
The mediator knows he now faces an uphill struggle in this part of North Kivu, where ethnic tensions run deep.
In Yaoundé, most proper cinemas disappeared years ago. That makes it tough for film buffs to get their fix. Many are pegging their hopes on the Culture Ministry's plans to refurbish several historic spots and burnish Cameroonians' love of the silver screen.
This is one of the last cinemas in Cameroon's capital, Yaoundé. A tiny screen showing a Chinese film at the end of a somber room.
If your film is finished, please leave.
The makeshift cinema club sits in a poor area of the city, far away from the centre. The era of people gathering in vast halls to watch films ended 20 years ago. This building used to house 8 screens, but the audiences melted away and it was converted into a sewing shop towards the end of the 1980s. Another, with a sprawling surface area, is now used as a furniture showroom.
We kept the same structure with the windows, the same structure. The wall that you see in front was the cinema screen itself. We haven't done anything with it, just left it as it was.
A few kilometers away lies another converted old cinema, which closed down in 2003. It couldn't compete with the modern world of piracy, cable networks and satellite television. The business became so unprofitable that the former owner abandoned a great treasure discovered by this employee.
That's the projector. This machine has been here for about 11 years. Seriously, it's really sad what's become of cinema in Cameroon. It's like history now.
However, for the cinephiles of Yaoundé, there's a glimmer of hope. This cinema screen has been refurbished by the Cameroon Culture Ministry. Meanwhile, a renovation of the historic cinema at the centre of town is also due to start in 8 months. The hope is that they will spark new interest in a bygone era of the communal enjoyment of film.
And finally, they're nutritious, reportedly delicious, and have the added bonus of turning into butterflies if they escape the pot. A look now at the insect appetisers that are one of the delicacies of Central African Republic.
Every Sunday, Lily goes to the market. She needs ingredients to prepare one of Central African Republic's most famous delicacies, known locally as yabanda de Mokongo. As soon as the rainy season begins, it's not long before bush grubs appear on plates. In Bangui, people can't get enough of them.
Whether it's for lunch, breakfast, even at 4 in the morning, I'm there, at the dining table, ready to eat caterpillars.
Preparing the dish is an art in itself. First step, choosing the right grubs. The fatter, the better.
You need to thoroughly clean the caterpillars, get rid of all the grass, leaves and twigs. Then you cut them and throw them in the pot.
By doing a pre-boil, the grubs become edible. Add onions and cocoa grass for flavour and let it all simmer together for 30 minutes. Lily believes it's not only delicious, but good for you too.
It's currently caterpillar season here in Central Africa. Every year, when the caterpillars come out, it's a feast. And they're really nourishing. Caterpillars are filled with vitamins. They give us strength.
Some types of grubs can contain more proteins, minerals and good fats than beef or chicken. Healthy and tasty, no surprises then that grubs go down a treat. Lily and her family can't wait to eat them.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks very much for joining us, and please do so again if you can. Take care.